Hi, it's Penny Black and Jill Foster here with another PB&J card class. And today's video is the second in a series of 4 videos featuring some very elegant stamps from Penny Black's newest Merry and Joy holiday collection. And using these stamps, I've created 4 one-layer cards that have the look of no-line watercoloring. And this is just a really fun technique, and because these are one layer, they are very easy to pop in the mail at the holiday time. So here's a look at the card that we will be creating today. And before we begin, I just wanted to mention that all of the supplies I'm using, including the stamps, numbers, and names, markers, paintbrush, inks, everything will be listed at the very end of the video up on screen. So if you want to look at that in further detail at that time, you can just hit pause to check it out. And ahead of time, I went ahead and did all of my stamping, and I have done this using our All the Trimmings stamp set, and I'm featuring that large stamp down in the bottom right-hand corner of this set. And I stamped this onto Canson 140-pound watercolor paper using Desert Sand Memento ink. And I like this ink because I don't have to strain to see it, but when I'm done, it will give it a pretty close to a no-line watercolor look. Now I'm doing my coloring and painting on this image using the Arteza Twi markers, and I will have all of the exact colors listed at the very end of the video. And with these, I typically like to put down a layer of color and then go back and blend that with my paintbrush. And I work in fairly small sections and then go in and do the blending. And I don't have any trouble blending those marker colors doing it this way. I don't recommend like coloring everything in, like the whole card, and then going back and blending because the marker color will really absorb down into that paper and it'll be a little bit more difficult to blend. If you do like that approach, you definitely can do that with these markers, but you may want to try doing that on some Bristol cardstock instead of the watercolor paper. So it's fun to play around with the different papers and the different mediums. I like with the Desert Sand Memento ink that I stamped with, it kind of takes on the color of whatever you color on top of it with. So that also adds to the no line look. Now that I've colored in these pine branches, I am just drying them with my heat tool, and I'm going to go back in with the fine tip of the marker. So these markers have a brush tip and then a very fine tip on the other end. The brush tip is also fairly small and very firm, so it's really nice for these very detailed images like this. Now I did go ahead and color with this next color onto just an old acrylic block, and then I'm picking it up with my paintbrush. This just gives a looser look to the color. Basically I'm creating like a watercolor palette using the marker, and I just wanted touches of this color sort of down in here by the apple, the pine cones, and so I am just adding that in. So I'm picking it up off the palette and then dropping it in and blending it out with the water that is on my brush. So that's just another way that you can use your markers. These are water-soluble markers, so this technique would work well with any water-soluble marker that you may have in your stash, like Tombow dual brush pens or Zig markers. You could also just paint this in using your favorite watercolor paints or colored in using Copic markers. I'm moving on now to these leaves that are part of this image. And just for some variation, I'm using some different colors on the leaves as I did on the pine needles, just to give this a little bit more interest and more color. I love color, and so at Christmas, I especially am always trying to find ways to sort of still keep things fairly traditional, but keep a variety of colors included. So what I did is I colored with my lightest color onto just a few small leaves, and then I wet that down with the just water on my paintbrush. I added the darker color in, and then I'm just blending that out with my paintbrush again. And then while that's still wet, if there are any areas that did not quite blend very well, I can just drop in a little more color and then blend that. I do find some of the very dark colors like dark this darkest green that I've used here doesn't blend quite as easily as some of the lighter colors. So just making sure sometimes to put it down onto a wet area makes that a little easier. So I followed that same process for all of those leaves. Now I'm just going to come in here and do the pine cones. I don't spend too much time on these trying to make them perfect or an exact replica of what is stamped there. I just sort of add some lines where they overlap, and then I blend that out with my paintbrush. Now this color has a sienna look to it, so it gets a little pink or purpley when I blend it out. So I will add, while that is still wet, just a touch of yellow on there. And I love this look. I think it just gives a lot of life to the pine cone instead of just a really dark brown. And I do try to leave some areas of white just so it doesn't become one big blob. And I will go ahead and dry that. And then I'm using the fine tip of that marker just to go back in and add some extra details, just based on the stamped lines that are already there. And this also gives it kind of a sketchy look. That's one thing that's really fun with this no line uh, watercolor look, is it looks like something you just sat down and painted as opposed to something that was stamped with like just a black outline and then later colored in. I said this in the previous video, but this is one way I really do like to create Christmas cards, is to go ahead and just pre-stamp a lot of panels using different images and similar layouts, and then I can go back in and paint them whenever I have a few extra moments by using the same mediums like the markers. It's very easy to transport these, so you can just have your panels stamped ahead of time and sit in front of the TV and color them, or just work on small sections at a time whenever you have a minute. It's a way to get a lot of Christmas cards done, but without getting too bored by mass producing the exact same card over and over. Again here I am just coloring onto that acrylic block and picking that up with my paintbrush and painting that in. I felt like I needed a little bit of that color from those smaller leaves down here in the pine branches just to pull it all together. So I'm just adding that light layer of that here and there, mostly towards the what I think of as like the base of those pine branches, and dropping it in and then rinsing off my brush and then blending it out using just some water just to lightly blend that out. And I like how that started to tie everything together. There, I just saw a couple areas I missed, so I just went back in with the marker and colored them in. And I'm still playing around here with those greens, just touching up those areas. Probably spending way more time than I actually need to, but I love to paint and color like this, so I end up fiddling a lot as I go. Now for the berries, I am using the couple of shades here, a darker sort of wine red, and then I am just blending that with a yellow ochre color and just blending them right there on the paper. Don't need to worry about going in with the paintbrush to blend those. And that makes it really fast to color, especially those very small berries. And if you find that you're getting a little bit of cross-contamination of that red color onto the yellow marker, just color with that yellow marker onto a piece of scratch paper until it colors clean, and then it is fine going ahead. I didn't have any problems with it after doing this technique. Finally, I'm using that very fine tip here on the marker to just go over these branches. Again, with this marker set, the toy markers from Arteza, I really love having these fine tips on all of these different colors. It's just very handy for this type of technique. Now you may have noticed I had already stamped my sentiment, but I just wanted to point out this is a miniature 3x4" set called Mary Builder. So you can use that large word Mary and combine it with lots of the other little smaller sentiments. And I love how that looks and all the different options that you get. I think that adds so much to the card. Now to finish this off, I am just doing a little bit of ink blending using a jumbo sponge dauber tool and Memento ink in the color of pistachio. And I just felt like that kind of helped ground that image over in that right hand corner of the card. I'm also going to add just a little bit of Toffee Crunch ink on there as well. And I'm using a pretty light hand just so I'm sure not to smear any of that color. So here's a look at the finished card. I hope you enjoyed today's video and are inspired to give this technique a try with some of Penny Black's newest elegant holiday stamps. If you did enjoy today's video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to our channel. You can connect with Penny Black on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, as well as our website and our blog. And I will link all of those for you down in the YouTube description box below. And if you stay tuned here, you will see that supply list as promised. Thanks for watching.